Hello, listener. If you're hearing this, you probably took out your garbage this morning without thinking twice about it. If you're new here, subscribe and comment where you're listening from. This story is about living inside that garbage, about spending 160 days in a garbage truck during the zombie apocalypse, surrounded by tons of rotting trash, learning that the most disgusting place in the world can also be the safest, about discovering that humans can adapt to almost anything when survival depends on it. My name is Derek Morrison, and before the world caught fire and died screaming, I was a sanitation worker for the City of Chicago Department of Streets and Sanitation. Specifically, I drove a garbage trucker 2019 Peterbilt 520, reloading compactor truck, bright orange with a city seal on the side, capable of holding 40 cubic yards of compacted trash, which translates to about 8 tons of garbage, before you need to dump at the transfer station. I'd been driving garbage trucks for 12 years when the outbreak started. It wasn't glamorous work. You wake up at 4 a.m., you drive a route through the city, picking up residential garbage. You deal with bags that split open and spill their contents. You smell like garbage all day. You go home and shower for 20 minutes trying to feel clean. Most people looked down on sanitation workers, thought we were uneducated or couldn't get better jobs. But the pay was good, really good, with the city benefits and overtime. And there was something satisfying about the work. You saw immediate results. Streets were cleaner because of you. The city functioned because trash got picked up. And you learned things about people from their garbage, what they ate, what they bought, what they threw away. Garbage tells stories if you know how to read it. I knew garbage. I understood it. I'd spent 12 years handling it, compacting it, hauling it. That knowledge would save my life. And it would trap me in a nightmare that still makes me gag when I smell anything even slightly off. The outbreak reached Chicago on June 3, 2024. I was on my morning route in the south side, picking up residential garbage from a neighborhood of small houses and apartment buildings. It was around 0730, early in my shift. I'd already collected maybe 4 tons of garbage. The truck was about half full. I was working the hydraulic controls at the back of the truck, watching another dumpster full of garbage get lifted and emptied into the hopper, when I heard screaming. Not unusual in this neighborhood, people fought, people shouted. I'd learned to tune it out. But this screaming was different. Terror. Pure terror. Multiple voices. I looked up, saw people running down the street, not jogging, sprinting, running like their lives depended on it. Behind them, I saw what they were running from. Infected. I didn't know that term yet, but I could see something was wrong with the people chasing the runners. They moved wrong, jerky, aggressive, fast, but uncoordinated. One of them caught a running woman, pulled her down, started biting. I watched for maybe 3 seconds, my brain trying to process what I was seeing. Then survival instinct kicked in. I was standing at the back of a garbage truck. The hopper, the opening where garbage goes in, was right there. And inside that hopper was for tons of garbage that had already been compacted into the main body of the truck. I climbed in. I know how insane that sounds. Climbing into a garbage truck, into literal tons of trash. But in that moment, it made perfect sense. The infected were coming. I needed to hide. And the inside of a garbage truck was one place nobody would ever think to look. I climbed over the hopper's rim, dropped into the compacted garbage below. It was soft compressed bags and loose trash forming a surface that gave way under my weight. The smell hit me immediately. Overwhelming, rotting food, spoiled milk, decomposing organic matter. The accumulated stench of a neighborhood's worth of garbage. I waded through the trash. It came up to my knees, sometimes my waist where it wasn't as compacted. Pushed my way toward the front of the truck's body, away from the hopper opening. Found a space between compacted layers of garbage where I could squeeze in. Covered myself with trash bags. Tried not to think about what I was lying in. I heard the infected reach the truck. Heard them attacking someone, my partner Jerry, who'd been driving while I worked the back. Heard Jerry screaming. Heard sounds I never want to hear again. Then silence. The infected moved past the truck. I could hear them through the metal walls, hunting for more victims. I stayed buried in the garbage, breathing through my mouth because the smell was so intense, it made my eyes water. I stayed there for what felt like hours, but was probably 30 minutes. Finally, the sounds outside diminished. I risked moving, climbed up through the garbage to where I could see out the hopper opening. The street was chaos, bodies, blood, abandoned cars, buildings burning in the distance, and infected, lots of them wandering aimlessly now that there were no more living people to chase. Jerry was dead. I could see his body near the truck's cab. The infected had torn him apart. I looked at the garbage truck's controls. The hydraulic panel was on the outside, near where I was standing in the hopper. I could reach it. which meant I could operate the truck's compactor and the rear door. A plan formed. Insane, desperate, but possible. I was going to seal myself inside the garbage truck, live in the trash, use the truck as a fortress. The infected couldn't get to me if I was sealed inside 8 tons of compacted garbage in a steel container. I worked the controls. The compactor blade was a massive hydraulic plate that pushed garbage from the hopper into the main body of the truck, compressing it to make room for more. I'd used it thousands of times. Now I used it to compact the garbage I was standing in, to create more solid, dense layers that would protect me. Then I closed the rear door. It was a heavy steel panel that sealed the hopper opening. Once closed, the interior of the truck was completely enclosed. Dark, sealed, safe. I was locked inside a garbage truck with 4 tons of trash, and I planned to stay there until the outbreak was over. Asterisk. The first thing you need to understand about living inside a garbage truck is that every assumption you have about what's bearable is wrong. I thought I knew garbage. I'd been handling it for 12 years. I'd smelled every horrible thing people throw away. Rotting meat, spoiled dairy, dirty diapers, dead animals. I thought I was immune to the smell. I was wrong. When you're working outside, the smell is bad, but it dissipates. Air circulates. You can breathe, but sealed inside a 40 cubic yard steel container with 4 tons of compressed garbage. In Chicago's summer heat, the smell becomes something else entirely. It's not just smell, it's a physical presence. It coats your throat. It seeps into your lungs. It becomes part of you. The first day, day 1, June 3rd, I spent most of my time trying not to vomit. I was buried in garbage up to my chest, sitting on compressed layers of trash bags, breathing air so thick with decay it felt like drowning. The temperature inside the truck was easily 90 degrees, maybe higher. No ventilation except tiny gaps around the seals. No light except what little filtered through those same gaps. I had my phone. The battery was at 67%. I used it sparingly for light, checking my situation, trying to understand what I'd gotten myself into. The truck's body was divided roughly into sections, based on how the compactor had pushed garbage. Near the back, closest to the hopper, the trash was loosely packed bags and loose items that hadn't been fully compressed yet. Moving forward, it got denser. The compactor blade had pushed everything toward the front, creating layers of increasingly compressed garbage. I'd positioned myself in a middle section, where there was just enough space to sit my back against the truck's wall, surrounded by bags of trash. I could feel things shifting around. The garbage wasn't static. It settled, compressed further under its own weight. Sometimes I'd hear bags popping as pressure built up. And the smell. God, the smell. Rotting food was the base note. Decomposing vegetables, spoiled meat, curdled dairy. Layered on top of that was everything else people throw away. Used coffee grounds, moldy bread, fish that had gone bad days before being thrown out, diapers full of human waste, feminine hygiene products, pet waste, chemical cleaners that had leaked from their containers, all of it mixing together in the heat, creating a stench so overwhelming it had physical weight. I vomited 3 times that first day. Each time, I had to bury the vomit in the garbage around me, adding to the horror I was living in. But I was alive. Outside, I could hear the infected, hear them attacking people who tried to run, hear screaming that went on for hours, hear the sounds of the city dying. Inside the garbage truck, I was safe, hidden, protected by the last thing anyone infected or human would ever think to search. Day 2 brought the first major problem: water. I had none. In my rush to seal myself in the truck, I hadn't grabbed any water, and now I was trapped in 90-degree heat, sweating constantly, breathing hot fetid air. Dehydration was going to kill me before the infected ever could. I searched through the garbage around me by feel and the dim light from my phone. Garbage bags full of household waste. I tore them open, looking for anything useful. Found empty containers, rotting food, useless items people had thrown away. Then I found it. A plastic water bottle. Half full. The water was warm and tasted like plastic, but it was water. I drank it slowly, savoring every drop. Over the next few hours, I found 3 more bottles. People throw away partially full drinks all the time. I'd never thought about it before, but now it was survival. I collected every bottle I could find, even ones with just a few ounces left. Poured them together into a larger container. Tried not to think about whose mouth had touched these bottles. By the end of day 2, I had maybe a liter of scavenged water. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Day 3, I discovered the condensation. The temperature inside the truck would drop at night, not by much. Maybe 270 degrees, but enough that condensation would form on the metal walls and ceiling. tiny droplets of water. I used a piece of plastic bag as a collector, holding it against the metal to catch the drops, then funneling the water into my bottle. It was slow, took hours to collect even a few ounces, but it was fresh water, created by the temperature differential. It tasted metallic from the truck's steel walls, but it was drinkable. Between scavenged bottles and condensation, I could survive. Barely. Food was the next problem. I know what you're thinking. Living in garbage, surrounded by thrown-away food, and I'm worried about starving. But you need to understand, most garbage isn't food, and most food that gets thrown away is thrown away for a reason. It's spoiled, rotten, moldy, dangerous to eat. But I was desperate. On day 4, I started searching systematically through the garbage around me, looking for anything edible. I found a loaf of bread. It was molded green and white spots covering most slices, but the center slices were less affected. I tore away the moldy parts, ate the remaining bread. It tasted like garbage because it had been sitting in garbage for days, but it was calories. I found a bag of chips, unopened. Someone had bought them and never opened them, and thrown the whole bag away. They were stale and tasted like the garbage smell that permeated everything, but they were edible. I found half a pizza in a box. It had been in the garbage for maybe 3 days based on the mold growth. I scraped off the mold, ate the crust, got sick an hour later, food poisoning from bacterial growth. Spent the next 6 hours with diarrhea, which I had to deal with while buried in garbage with no bathroom. That was when I learned the real horror of living in a garbage truck. Not the smell, not the filth, but the complete absence of hygiene. No bathroom, no toilet paper, no way to clean yourself. I had to defecate into garbage bags and bury them in the surrounding trash. Had to urinate into bottles when I could find them, or just let it soak into the garbage around me. I was living in my own waste, literally, adding my bodily functions to the tons of garbage I was buried in by day 7. I'd established a routine. Wake up when light started filtering through the gaps that meant morning. Collect condensation water. Search nearby garbage for anything useful: food, containers, materials. Eat whatever I could find that wouldn't immediately poison me. Rest during the hottest part of the day when the temperature inside the truck reached 100+ degrees. Collect more water in the evening. Sleep in the garbage, covered in trash bags. Breathing air so foul it made my lungs burn. The psychological toll was worse than the physical conditions. I was alone, completely alone, buried in garbage in the dark. No human contact, no conversation, just me and the trash and the sounds of infected outside. I talked to myself, had full conversations, argued with myself about whether to stay or try to escape, told myself stories to pass the time, sang songs even though my voice echoed weirdly in the enclosed space. The garbage became my world. I learned its geography, knew where the compressed sections were that I could lean against, knew where the loose sections were that I could search for supplies, knew which areas had the worst smell, usually wherever meat had been thrown away, and which areas were more tolerable. I found treasures in the trash. A working flashlight with dying batteries. I used it for maybe 30 seconds, total over the next week before the batteries died. A magazine someone had thrown away. I read it cover to cover 5 times, just to have something to occupy my mind. A stuffed animal some kid had thrown out. I kept it because having something soft in all this garbage felt important. On day 10, I heard something that made me freeze. Voices. Human voices. Outside the truck. Check the vehicles, someone said. Anything that's sealed. The infected can't get into closed spaces. They were searching for survivors. Going vehicle to vehicle, and they were going to open my garbage truck. I heard footsteps approaching. Heard someone trying the truck's cab door. This one's locked. Driver's dead in the seat. Check the back. The compactor. My heart was pounding. They were going to open the rear door, going to find me buried in garbage, and I didn't know if that was rescue or danger. I heard the hydraulic controls being operated. Someone knew how to work a garbage truck. The rear door started to open, letting in the first natural light I'd seen in 10 days. Jesus Christ, the smell, someone said. It's full of garbage. Of course it is. It's a garbage truck. Nobody could survive in there. Let's keep moving. The door closed again. Hydraulics wind as it sealed. The light disappeared. They'd looked right at the garbage truck and decided nobody could possibly be inside. The smell had saved me. The sheer disgusting nature of living in trash had made them dismiss the possibility that anyone would choose this. I stayed hidden, didn't call out, didn't reveal myself, because I didn't know who those people were, didn't know if they were friendly or dangerous. The truck was horrible, but it was safe. Better to endure the garbage than risk the unknown outside. That was the moment. I realized I might be in this truck for a long time. That rescue wasn't coming, that I'd chosen to bury myself in garbage, and now I had to live with that choice. Day 15 brought the rats. I should have expected them. Garbage attracts rats. That's basic knowledge. But somehow, in my desperate scramble to hide from infected, I hadn't thought about what else lived in garbage. I heard them first. Scratching, squeaking, movement in the trash around me. At first I thought it was just the garbage settling, bags shifting under pressure. Then I felt something run across my leg in the darkness. I jerked away, slammed my head against the truck's metal wall. Pain exploded through my skull, but the thing kept moving. I could feel it, small and fast, scurrying through the garbage. I turned on my phone's flashlight. Battery be damned. I needed to see rats, at least a dozen of them that I could see in the immediate area. Brown bodies, gleaming eyes reflecting my phone's light. They'd been living in the garbage the whole time I'd been here, and I just hadn't noticed them in the darkness. They scattered when the light hit them, disappearing into the trash. But I knew they were still there, all around me, living in the same garbage I was living in. I'm not particularly scared of rats. Working sanitation, you see them all the time. But living with them, surrounded by them in the dark, feeling them run across you while you sleep, that's different. That's horror. That night, or what I thought was night, time was getting fuzzy. I felt them more boldly. One ran across my chest. Another sniffed at my hand, probably smelling food residue. I had to sleep with my arms tucked against my body, my legs pulled up, trying to minimize contact. But the rats weren't just scary. They were also competition. I'd been searching through garbage bags for food, and the rats had the same idea. Any food I found, they'd already found. They'd chewed through bags, gotten into containers, contaminated everything with their droppings and urine. I had to start moving faster when I found food. Had to eat it immediately before rats could get to it. Had to accept that I was now in direct competition with rodents for garbage scraps. On day 17, I caught one. I know how that sounds, but I was starving. The scavenged food from the garbage was running out. I'd been through most of the accessible bags, and what remained was either too spoiled to eat or already claimed by rats. I'd lost weight, could feel my ribs clearly, could see my arms getting thinner. Rat meat is meat. It's protein. It's calories. I made a trap from materials in the garbage. A container with baits and moldy bread I couldn't eat, but rats would. A mechanism to close it when weight triggered it. Basic trap design I'd seen on survival shows. It worked. Caught a rat on the first night. Killing it was harder than I expected. I had to do it quickly, humanely as possible. Used a piece of metal to hit it hard, end it fast. Then I had to process it, remove the fur, gut it, prepare the meat. I cooked it using a method I'd developed. Garbage trucks have batteries, large 12-volt batteries in the cab. I couldn't reach them directly, but I could reach the wiring that ran through the truck's body. I stripped wires, created a heating element using resistance, and slowly cooked small pieces of meat. Rat tastes like rat, gamey, tough, with a flavor that's hard to describe. But cooked properly, it's edible. It's survival. I caught and ate 3 rats over the next week, each time getting better at the process, each time feeling a little more like an animal myself, hunting and eating rodents in the garbage like I was just another scavenger. Day 22 brought a new horror, maggots. I'd seen them before in small numbers, a few here and there in bags of rotting food. But on day 22, I discovered a massive infestation. An entire section of garbage, maybe 2 cubic feet of space, was crawling with them. White, writhing larvae covering every surface, eating the rotting organic matter, producing that wet sound of thousands of tiny bodies moving. The smell from that section was indescribable. The maggots were breaking down the garbage, releasing gases and fluids, creating a soup of decomposition that made the normal garbage smell seem pleasant by comparison. I tried to avoid that area, but the truck's interior was only so large. I couldn't get far from anything. I had to live with the knowledge that 2 feet away from where I slept, thousands of maggots were feeding on rot. And they spread. Over the next few days, I found maggots in other areas. They were taking over the truck, breaking down the garbage, turning it into something even more disgusting than it already was. Some got on me. I'd feel them crawling on my skin, had to brush them off, had to check my clothes constantly to make sure I wasn't carrying them. One night I woke up with one in my ear, had to dig it out with a piece of wire, feeling it squirm against my eardrum. I developed my first serious infection around day 25. A cut on my arm, I didn't even know how I'd gotten it. Probably scraped on sharp garbage, had become infected. Red, swollen, hot to touch. I had no antibiotics, no medicine, no way to treat it properly. I cleaned it as best I could with condensation water, kept it covered with relatively clean plastic, hoped my immune system would fight it off. The infection got worse before it got better. Fever, chills in the 100-degree heat, delirium. I have hazy memories of day 27 and 28, lying in the garbage, sweating and shaking, convinced I was going to die in this truck and become just another piece of trash. But my immune system won. The fever broke on day 29, the infection began to recede. I survived though. The experience left me weaker and more aware of how precarious my situation was. Day 30 brought the worst moment of my time in the truck. I was searching through garbage near the hopper, in the less compressed section, looking for food or water. I'd wedged myself between layers of trash bags, reaching into a particularly dense pocket. My weight shifted. The garbage under me gave way. I started sinking. Panic. Immediate, overwhelming panic. The garbage was swallowing me. I was sinking into it like quicksand, trash bags shifting and compressing around me, pulling me down into the mass. I tried to push myself up, but there was nothing solid to push against. Everything was soft, giving way. I was being buried alive in garbage. I managed to grab onto something solid, the truck's wall, pulled myself toward it, fighting against the trash that was trying to consume me. Got one hand on a structural beam, then the other, pulled myself free, gasping, heart racing. But the experience left me shaken. I'd almost died, suffocated in garbage, buried in trash. The truck that was protecting me was also trying to kill me. I became more careful after that, tested every step, avoided the loosely packed areas, stayed near the walls where the truck structure provided something solid. Day 35 was when I realized the garbage was decomposing around me. The truck's interior was changing. The trash bags were breaking down, their contents mixing together. Liquids from decomposing food were leaching out, creating a soup of rot at the bottom of the truck. The solid garbage I'd been sitting on was becoming soft, mushy, less stable. The smell evolved too. The initial overwhelming stench had been bad, but at least it was familiar garbage smell. Now it was changing into something worse. The smell of advanced decomposition, gases being released by bacterial breakdown, chemical reactions creating odors I'd never encountered before. I was breathing those gases constantly, could feel them in my lungs, could taste them in my mouth, could feel them probably damaging my respiratory system. But what choice did I have? Go outside and face the infected. I'd made my choice on day 1. Now I had to live with it. Day 40. I heard the first signs that the outside world was changing. Explosions. Distant, but unmistakable. Heavy weapons fire. The military was fighting back. Chicago was becoming a battlefield. I could hear helicopters passing overhead. Hear announcements from loudspeakers in the distance, though I couldn't make out the words. Hear what sounded like bombing runs, the whistle of falling ordnance followed by impacts that shook the truck. The infected outside the truck became more agitated. I could hear them responding to the sounds, moving in groups, making those horrible sounds they made, and I stayed in my garbage fortress, listening to the world fight a war I wasn't part of, surviving in filth while everyone else fought or died. I started keeping a journal around day 45. Found a notebook someone had thrown away barely used, mostly blank pages. Found a pen that still worked. Started writing every day, documenting my experience, giving myself something to do besides survive. The journal entries from those early days are hard to read now. You can see my mental state degrading. The handwriting gets shakier, the entries get stranger. I talk about the garbage like it's alive. Describe the rats as my roommates. Refer to the truck as home. I was losing my mind slowly, adapting to conditions that no human should have to adapt to. Day 50 brought an unexpected discovery that changed everything. I was searching through garbage in a section I hadn't fully explored too close to the maggot infestation for comfort, but I was getting desperate for supplies. The accessible garbage had been thoroughly scavenged. I found a bag that felt different, heavier, more solid. I opened it carefully. Food, real food, non-perishable items. Someone had thrown away a bunch of canned goods, maybe cleaned out their pantry during the panic of the outbreak. Cans of beans, vegetables, soup, fruit, a dozen cans total. I actually cried. Sat there in the garbage holding a can of peaches and cried. Real food, not scraps, not moldy bread, not rat meat, actual, safe, nutritious food. The cans had been in the garbage for 50 days. But canned food is designed to last years. As long as the cans weren't damaged, the contents would be safe. I opened the first can bean sourcing a piece of sharp metal I'd fashioned into a crude can opener. Ate them cold, straight from the can. They were the best thing I'd ever tasted. Better than any restaurant meal. Better than anything. Because they represented hope. They meant I could survive longer. Maybe long enough for rescue. I rationed the cans carefully. 1 can every 3 days. That gave me 36 days of guaranteed food. Combined with the rats I could trap and whatever garbage I could scavenge, I could survive maybe 60 more days. 60 brought the compactor incident. The garbage in the truck had been settling and decomposing for 2 months. The volume had decreased significantly. What had started as 4 tons of compressed garbage was now maybe 3 tons of semi-liquid sludge mixed with solid waste. I needed more space. The livable areas were getting smaller as garbage shifted and compressed. And I'd been thinking about the compactor. If I could use it carefully, I could compress the garbage more, create more space for myself. The controls were on the outside of the truck, but I'd been studying the hydraulic system. The compactor blade ran on hydraulics, powered by the truck's auxiliary engine. If I could reach the wiring, maybe I could activate it from inside. I spent 3 days working on it, stripped wires carefully, traced the hydraulic control system, created a manual trigger using the 12-volt battery system. On day 60, I was ready to test it. I positioned myself in the safest area I could find near the front of the truck's body, where the compactor blade would end its cycle. Made sure I had room to move if something went wrong. I triggered the system. The compactor blade began moving. I could hear the hydraulics engaging, feel the vibration through the truck's body. The blade pushed into the garbage, compressing it, forcing it forward. Everything was working. I was creating more space. Success. Then the garbage shifted. The blade was pushing loose garbage forward, but it wasn't moving evenly. A pocket of compressed trash gave way suddenly. Garbage avalanched toward me, and the blade kept moving, programmed to complete its cycle. I was going to be crushed, compacted along with the garbage. Compressed into the mass, I scrambled toward the wall, trying to get out of the blade's path. But the garbage was shifting under me, giving way, pulling me down. I could see the blade advancing, an unstoppable hydraulic force designed to compress tons of material. I reached the wall, pressed myself against it. The blade was 2 feet away. 1 foot. I could feel the pressure building as garbage compressed against me. Then the blade stopped. End of cycle. It retracted back to its resting position. I was alive, barely, pressed against the wall with compressed garbage up to my chest, breathing hard, heart racing. I'd almost died. Compressed into trash. Another piece of garbage. I never tried to use the compactor again. Asterisk. Day 65 was when I discovered the garbage was keeping me alive in ways I hadn't anticipated. A group of infected approached the truck. I could hear them, the shuffling, the guttural sounds, the way they moved in a pack. They got close. Very close. I could hear them right outside the truck's walls, maybe investigating it. I froze. Stopped breathing. Waited for them to force their way in, to tear open the rear door, to find me. They didn't. They moved around the truck for maybe 30 seconds, then left. Wandered away like they'd lost interest, and I realized they couldn't smell me. The overwhelming stench of rotting garbage masked my human scent completely. To the infected, this truck was just another piece of urban debris, not worth investigating. The very thing that made my life unbearable, the horrific smell, was also camouflage protection. I tested this theory over the next week. When I heard infected approaching, I'd stay still, buried in the garbage. Every time they'd pass by without showing serious interest in the truck. The few times they did investigate, they'd give up quickly, repelled by the smell or finding nothing that registered as prey. The garbage was my armor, my shield, my salvation and my prison all at once. By day 70, I'd lost probably 40 pounds. I could feel bones I'd never noticed before. My clothes hung off me like rags. I was gaunt, skeletal, a living scarecrow buried in trash. But I was adapting. The smell that had made me vomit on day 1 was now just background. I barely noticed it anymore. My nose had either adapted or died, I couldn't tell which. The filth that had horrified me was now normal. I'd stopped trying to stay clean. There was no point. I was covered in garbage residue, in decomposition fluids, in my own waste. I was part of the trash now. I'd become feral. That's the only word for it. I ate with my hands, tearing into rat meat or canned food without utensils. I urinated and defecated wherever was convenient, adding to the waste around me. I slept in piles of garbage like an animal in a den. I hunted rats in the darkness by sound and feel. The psychological changes were worse than the physical ones. I talked to the garbage, had conversations with it. Thanked it when I found something useful. Apologized when I had to shift it around. I'd named some of the rats the ones I saw regularly but hadn't caught yet. I'd created an entire mental world inside this truck to cope with the isolation. My journal entries from this period are disturbing to read. I wrote about the garbage kingdom and how I was its ruler. I wrote elaborate descriptions of the different districts of the truck, the wet zone where liquids pooled, the dry lands where older garbage had desiccated, the rat warrens where the rodents nested. I drew maps, created governance systems for my imaginary kingdom. I was losing my mind, but staying sane enough to recognize I was losing my mind. That awareness was its own kind of torture. Day 80 brought heavy rain. I could hear it pounding on the truck's roof, could feel the temperature drop slightly, and I realized fresh water. The truck's body wasn't perfectly sealed. Water was getting in through gaps, through vents, through a dozen tiny openings. It was running down the walls, collecting in low spots, mixing with the garbage fluids. I collected it, used every container I had. The water was contaminated. It had run over garbage, mixed with decomposition fluids, but I could filter it. Used layers of fabric torn from clothes found in the garbage. Ran the water through multiple times. It wasn't pure, but it was better than condensation water. That rainstorm gave me maybe 3 gallons of water, more than I'd had in weeks. I rationed it carefully, used it for drinking and for the first real bath I'd had in 80 days, using a wet rag to scrub the worst of the filth from my skin. The bath revealed how bad my physical condition had become. My skin was covered in sores and rashes. Some were infected, weeping, painful to touch. My hair was matted with garbage residue. My fingernails were black with grime that wouldn't come out. My teeth felt loose, probably from malnutrition. I was rotting, just like the garbage around me. Decomposing slowly. Day 85, I heard voices outside again. Different from the Day 10 incident. These were military. Sector 7 clear. Moving to Sector 8. All vehicles checked. No survivors found. They were doing a systematic sweep, checking every vehicle, every building, every possible shelter. Looking for survivors. I had a choice. Reveal myself. Call out. Get rescued. Or stay hidden. Stay safe in my garbage fortress. I stayed hidden. I know that sounds insane. Rescue was right there. Salvation, a return to civilization. But I'd been in this truck for 85 days. I'd adapted to it, and I was terrified of what was outside. Terrified of the infected. Terrified of other humans who might be dangerous. Terrified of leaving my shelter. That the garbage truck had become my security blanket, my safe space. The idea of leaving it caused genuine panic. I'd developed a psychological dependence on my prison. So I let them pass. Let rescue walk away. Chose garbage over freedom. That was the moment I knew I was truly broken, that my mind had been fundamentally damaged by this experience. But I couldn't change my choice, couldn't force myself to call out, could only sit in the garbage and listen to salvation walk away. Day 90 brought a heat wave. Chicago's summer at its worst. Temperatures outside probably hit 95 degrees. Inside the truck, with no ventilation and decomposing organic matter generating its own heat, it must have been 120 degrees or higher. I couldn't function, could barely move. Lay in the garbage, sweating, feeling like I was being cooked alive. Drank water constantly, but couldn't stay hydrated. Felt my thoughts getting fuzzy, my vision tunneling. Heat exhaustion, maybe heat stroke. I was dying. I had to open the truck. Had to let air in or I wouldn't survive. I used my makeshift controls to crack the rear door, just a few inches. Enough for air to circulate. The outside air flowed in. It was hot, but it was moving. It wasn't the stagnant oven air of the truck's interior. It helped, barely, but it helped, and the smell flowed out. 90 days of decomposing garbage in summer heat. All the gases and odors I'd been breathing escaped into the outside world. I imagine it must have created a cloud of stench for blocks around, but no infected came. The smell was too overwhelming even for them. It was a declaration that this truck contained nothing but death and rot. Stay away. I kept the door cracked for 3 days until the heat wave passed. Survived added heat stroke to the list of things that had almost killed me in this truck. Day 100 was a milestone. I'd been living in a garbage truck for over 3 months. 100 days buried in trash. 100 days of filth and rats and decomposition and isolation. I marked it in my journal. Drew a crude cake. Sang happy birthday to myself. Celebrated my survival in the most depressing way possible. I still had food, a few cans left, plus whatever I could scavenge and hunt. Water from rain collection and condensation. The truck was still protecting me. I could survive longer, maybe another 60 days if I was careful. But did I want to? That was the question I started asking myself. Survival had been automatic for the first 100 days. Instinct. But now, with time to think, I had to confront what I was surviving for. What was the point of living like this? What was I preserving by staying in this truck? I had no answers. Only the daily routine. Wake up, collect water, search for food, avoid rats, survive another day, repeat. Day 110 brought a discovery that changed my perspective. I was searching through a section of garbage I'd mostly ignored, too close to the maggot infestation, too unpleasant even by my degraded standards. But I was running out of places to search. I found a bag. Inside it, children's items, toys, clothes, a baby bottle, and photographs, a family photo, parents with 2 young kids, smiling at the camera. A recent photo based on the quality. I stared at that photo for an hour. These people had thrown this bag away. Probably during the panic. Probably because they'd fled their home in a hurry and grabbed the wrong bag. Or maybe they'd died and someone else had cleaned out their house. But they'd been real. They'd had lives. Had loved each other. Had existed in the world before the outbreak. And here I was, living in their trash. Surviving among the physical remnants of lives that had ended. The garbage wasn't just waste, it was evidence. Proof that people had lived here. Had eaten and worked and thrown things away and been human. I wasn't just surviving in garbage. I was living in a tomb. A memorial to the dead made from their discarded belongings. That realization broke something in me. Or maybe fixed something. I'm still not sure. But I knew I couldn't stay in this truck forever. Eventually I had to leave. Had to rejoin the world. Whatever was left of it. Day 120. The truck started moving. Not me moving it. Someone outside was moving it. I could feel the whole vehicle shifting, tilting. Heard the sound of a large vehicle, a tow truck, probably engaging with my truck. They were towing the garbage truck, taking it somewhere. Panic flooded through me. I was trapped inside. Couldn't get out while the truck was moving. Didn't know where they were taking me. Didn't know what would happen when we arrived. The journey took maybe 20 minutes. The truck was pulled through streets. I could feel every bump and turn. Then it stopped. I heard voices outside. Another one for the incinerator. Dead driver in the cab. Probably been here since the outbreak. Incinerator. They were going to burn the truck. Dispose of it along with all the garbage inside. They didn't know I was in here. I had to reveal myself. Had to get out before they started the incineration process. I used my controls to open the rear door fully. Light flooded in actual daylight. Bright and painful after so long in dimness. I climbed up through the garbage. Emerged into the open air. 3 soldiers stared at me in shock. I must have looked like something from a nightmare, emaciated, filthy, covered in garbage and waste, emerging from tons of trash like a zombie rising from a grave. One of them raised a weapon. Don't move. Identify yourself. Derek Morrison, I croaked. My voice was rough from disuse. Sanitation worker. I've been in there since June, day 1 of the outbreak. I'm alive. I'm not infected. They kept weapons trained on me. Step out slowly. Keep your hands visible. I climbed out of the truck. Stood on solid ground for the first time in 120 days. My legs almost gave out. I'd been living in soft garbage for so long that solid concrete felt wrong. Jesus Christ, the smell, one soldier said, backing away. I looked down at myself. I was caked in filth, literally covered in decomposed garbage from head to toe. I smelled so bad that even soldiers who'd been dealing with dead bodies for months couldn't stand near me. I need to be decontaminated, I said. Medical attention, food, water. Please. They called for a hazmat team. I stood in the open air, the sun on my face, wind in my hair, breathing fresh air for the first time in 4 months. It was overwhelming. Too much input after so long in the dark, still fetid environment of the truck. The hazmat team arrived, put me in a decontamination shower right there in the street, hosed me down with chemicals and water, scrubbing away 120 days of accumulated filth. The water that ran off me was black, thick with garbage residue. They burned my clothes. Couldn't be saved. Gave me a hospital gown. Loaded me into an ambulance. Took me to a military field hospital. Day 120 was the day I left the garbage truck. But it wasn't the day my ordeal ended. Asterisk, the medical examination took 6 hours. They found things I'd stopped noticing. Severe malnutrition. I'd lost 52 pounds, down to 138 pounds from my normal 190. Dehydration despite my water collection efforts. Multiple infected wounds and sores covering my body. A fungal infection so widespread they had to photograph it for the medical records because they'd never seen anything like it. Respiratory damage from breathing decomposition gases for 4 months. Dental problems from malnutrition and lack of hygiene. Parasites, probably from the rats or contaminated water. And psychological trauma that the field psychiatrist classified as severe PTSD with dissociative features. They quarantined me for 72 hours. Standard procedure for anyone who'd been isolated during the outbreak. Made sure I wasn't infected. Made sure I wasn't carrying diseases that could spread to the survivor population. I spent those 72 hours in a clean hospital bed, in a clean room, breathing clean air, and I couldn't sleep. The cleanliness felt wrong. The bed was too soft. The air didn't smell right, it didn't smell like anything, and after 4 months of overwhelming stench, the absence of smell was disturbing. I asked for my clothes back. They told me they'd been incinerated. I asked for something from the truck. They told me the entire vehicle had been burned. Everything I'd lived with for 120 days was gone, erased, like it had never existed. I felt like I'd been erased too. The person who'd climbed into that truck on day 1 was dead. The person who'd climbed out on day 120 was someone else. Something else, a feral garbage creature that was now being forced back into human shape. The psychiatrist sessions started on day 123. They wanted to understand what I'd experienced, wanted to document it for their records, wanted to help me process the trauma. But how do you explain to someone what it's like to live in garbage for 4 months? How do you describe the smell, the filth, the degradation, the slow loss of humanity, the conversations with rats, the hallucinations? The moment you realize you're covered in maggots and you don't even care anymore. I tried. I told them everything. Showed them my journal, the pages stained with garbage fluids, the entries getting progressively more disturbed. They read it with expressions I couldn't interpret. Horror maybe, fascination, academic interest. You survived an extraordinary ordeal, the psychiatrist said. Your psychological resilience is remarkable. I'm not resilient, I told her. I'm broken. I chose to stay in that truck even when rescue came. I let them walk away. That's not resilience. That's insanity. It's survival, she countered. You made the choice that kept you alive. In the moment, isolated and traumatized, you chose the known horror over the unknown danger. That's not insanity. That's a rational response to an irrational situation. But I knew the truth. I'd become dependent on the garbage truck, psychologically addicted to my prison. Even now, 5 days out, I wanted to go back. Wanted to be in that familiar, disgusting, safe space, rather than this clean, unfamiliar world. They transferred me to a survivor. Settlement on day 130, a fortified community in what used to be a suburb of Chicago. Maybe 2,000 people living behind walls, growing food, trying to rebuild some semblance of civilization. I was given a small apartment, clean, furnished, with running water and electricity from generators. Everything a survivor could want. I lasted 3 days before I had a complete breakdown. The cleanliness was unbearable. The silence was crushing. No rats scratching, no garbage settling, no familiar sounds. The space was too open. I felt exposed, vulnerable. The bed was wrong. The air was wrong. Everything was wrong. I collected garbage. Started bringing trash into my apartment. Food scraps from meals. Discarded items I found. Anything I could gather. I piled it in the corner of my room. Sat next to it. The smell of the weak smell of fresh garbage was comforting, familiar. Someone reported me. Concerned citizen who'd seen me collecting garbage. Mental health team came to check on me. They found me sitting in the corner of my apartment, surrounded by trash I'd collected, crying, I can't do this. I told them, I can't live like a human anymore. I don't know how. They moved me to the mental health facility, a converted school building where they housed survivors with severe trauma. I wasn't alone. There were others who'd experienced things that broke them. A woman who'd watched her children die and now couldn't speak. A man who'd survived a shelter collapse and now had panic attacks in any enclosed space. A teenager who'd been alone in a basement for 6 months and had forgotten how to interact with people. We were the damaged ones. The survivors who'd survived but lost something essential in the process. It's survival, she countered. You made the choice that kept you alive. In the moment, isolated and traumatized, you chose the known horror over the unknown danger. That's not insanity. That's a rational response to an irrational situation. But I knew the truth. I'd become dependent on the garbage truck, psychologically addicted to my prison. Even now, 5 days out, I wanted to go back. Wanted to be in that familiar, disgusting, safe space rather than this clean, unfamiliar world. They transferred me to a survivor. Settlement on day 130. A fortified community in what used to be a suburb of Chicago. Maybe 2,000 people living behind walls, growing food. trying to rebuild some semblance of civilization. I was given a small apartment, clean, furnished, with running water and electricity from generators. Everything a survivor could want. I lasted 3 days before I had a complete breakdown. The cleanliness was unbearable. The silence was crushing. No rats scratching, no garbage settling, no familiar sounds. The space was to open eye, felt exposed, vulnerable. The bed was wrong. The air was wrong. Everything was wrong. I collected garbage, started bringing trash into my apartment, food scraps from meals, discarded items I found, anything I could gather. I piled it in the corner of my room, sat next to it. The smell, even the weak smell of fresh garbage, was comforting. Familiar. Someone reported me. Concerned citizen who'd seen me collecting garbage. Mental health team came to check on me. They found me sitting in the corner of my apartment, surrounded by trash I'd collected, crying. I can't do this, I told them. I can't live like a human anymore. I don't know how. They moved me to the mental health facility, a converted school building where they housed survivors with severe trauma. I wasn't alone. There were others who'd experienced things that broke them. A woman who'd watched her children die and now couldn't speak. A man who'd survived a shelter collapse and now had panic attacks in any enclosed space. A teenager who'd been alone in a basement for 6 months and had forgotten how to interact with people. We were the damaged ones. The survivors who'd survived but lost something essential in the process. The therapy was intensive. Daily sessions. Group therapy with other trauma survivors. Exposure therapy to help me adapt to cleanliness and normal living conditions. Cognitive behavioral therapy to address my psychological dependence on the garbage. Truck environment. It helped. Slowly, over weeks and then months, I began to function more normally. Began to sleep in a bed without collecting garbage first. Began to tolerate cleanliness without panic. Began to have conversations with people instead of with imaginary rat companions. But I never fully recovered. You can't live in garbage for 120 days and come out unchanged. I have triggers. The smell of garbage, even normal household trash cans, send me into flashbacks so intense I lose awareness of where I am. I'm back in the truck, buried in waste, feeling rats run across me in the dark. I can't work sanitation anymore. Can't be around garbage trucks. Can't even see them without panic attacks. My career, my livelihood, my identity for 12 years all gone because I spent 4 months living in the very thing I used to collect. I have compulsions. I check spaces before I enter them, making sure there's always an exit, making sure I won't be trapped. I hoard food, can't help it. My brain is convinced starvation is always around the corner. I keep things too long before throwing them away. Everything might be useful, might be needed, might save my life. And I smell things that aren't there. Phantom smells. My brain is still convinced I'm in that truck, surrounded by decomposition. I'll be eating a meal and suddenly tastes garbage. I'll be in a clean room and smell rotting food. My olfactory system is permanently damaged, misfiring constantly. But I survived. I'm alive. I made it 160 days during the zombie apocalypse, 120 of those days in a garbage truck. 40 more recovering and adapting. On day 160 today. As I tell you this story, I went to see the truck. They didn't burn it. Turned out they'd only burned the garbage inside, not the vehicle itself. The truck was in a salvage yard, slated for parts recovery. I got permission to visit it. Standing next to it felt surreal. It looked so normal. Just an orange garbage truck with the city seal on the side. You'd never know that someone had lived inside it for 4 months. That it had been a fortress, a prison, a home, a nightmare. I climbed into the back. The interior had been pressure washed, all the garbage removed. It was empty, clean, just a metal container. But I could still smell it, could still feel it, could still sense the presence of those 120 days. I sat in there for maybe an hour, in the empty, clean space where I'd lived in filth. And I cried, for what I'd lost, for who I'd been, for the price of survival. A worker found me eventually, asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine. Climbed out, walked away from the garbage truck for what I hope is the last time, but I know I'll never really leave it. Part of me is still in there, will always be in there, buried in garbage, talking to rats, surviving in the most degrading conditions imaginable because the alternative was death. I want to tell you about the things I learned living in that truck. The truths about survival that nobody talks about. First, survival isn't noble. It's not heroic. It's not dignified. It's desperate and ugly and often involves doing things that destroy the person you were. I ate food from garbage. I lived in my own waste. I hunted rats with my bare hands. I became an animal. That's what survival actually is, the willingness to abandon humanity. if that's what it takes to keep breathing. Second, safety isn't about being protected from harm. It's about feeling protected from harm. The garbage truck was objectively horrible, dangerous, unhealthy, psychologically damaging, but it felt safe. My brain latched onto it as protection, and that perception became more powerful than reality. I chose perceived safety over actual rescue. That's how trauma warps your thinking. Third, you can adapt to almost anything. The human capacity for adaptation is terrifying. On day 1, I was vomiting from the smell. By day 30, I barely noticed it. By day 60, I couldn't imagine life without it. We normalize horror. We make peace with the unacceptable. We convince ourselves that whatever we're enduring is sustainable, is manageable, is survivable. And sometimes we're right. But the cost of that adaptation is measured in pieces of your psyche that you'll never get back. Fourth, isolation destroys you in ways you don't recognize until it's too late. I thought I was coping, thought I was maintaining my mental health through journaling and routine and rational thinking. But I was talking to garbage, naming rats, creating fantasy kingdoms in my head. My grip on reality was slipping, and I didn't even notice because there was no one to reflect my behavior back to me, no one to say, this isn't normal. Fifth, the hardest part of survival isn't surviving, it's living with what you did to survive. I survived, I'm alive, but I'm also fundamentally broken. The therapy helps, the support groups help, the medication helps, but nothing can undo the fact that I spent 120 days living in garbage, and that experience rewrote something essential in my brain. I can't smell correctly anymore. Food tastes wrong because my sense of smell is damaged. I have olfactory hallucinations, constantly phantom smells of garbage that aren't really there. My brain is stuck in that truck, even though my body left months ago. I can't be in enclosed spaces without panic attacks. Cars, elevators, small rooms, they all trigger flashbacks. I'm back in the truck, feeling the walls close in, feeling like I'm being buried in garbage again. I can't stand cleanliness. I know that sounds contradictory after living in such filth, but it's true. Clean, sterile environments make me deeply uncomfortable. I feel exposed, vulnerable, wrong. I need some level of mess, some controlled chaos, to feel normal. My apartment is never fully clean. I keep garbage bags that I don't throw out. I create small piles of clutter. It's the only way I can function. Asterisk, and I can't explain any of this to people who didn't experience it. How do you tell someone that you're more comfortable with garbage than that the smell of trash is comforting rather than repulsive? That you sometimes wish you were back in that truck because at least there you knew the rules, knew the dangers, knew how to survive. You can't, so you don't. You smile and nod and pretend you're recovering. Pretend you're getting better. Pretend the person they're talking to is still human in the normal sense. But inside, you know the truth. You survived, but you didn't escape. Not really, because the garbage truck is still with you. Always will be. The settlement psychologist told me that sharing my story might help. That talking about the experience, putting it into words, making it real for other people, that this could be therapeutic, could help me process what happened. So I'm sharing it. All of it. The disgusting details I've tried to forget. The shameful moments I've never told anyone. The truth about what 120 days in a garbage truck actually means. And maybe she's right. Maybe telling you this helps. Or maybe it just spreads the contamination. Maybe now you'll think about it next time you see a garbage truck. Wonder if someone could actually survive inside one. Wonder what it would smell like. Wonder what it would do to your mind. I hope you never find out. I hope you never face the choice between death and degradation. I hope you never have to learn your own capacity for adaptation. Never have to discover where your humanity ends and survival instinct begins. But if you do, if the world ends and you're faced with impossible choices, remember this. Survival always has a price. The question isn't whether you'll pay it. The question is whether you'll recognize yourself after the payment is complete. I survived 160 days during the zombie apocalypse. I'm alive. I won, but when I look in the mirror, I see someone who looks like me but isn't quite me. Someone who lived in garbage and became garbage. Someone who survived but lost the person they were saving. And I don't know if that counts as winning anymore. It's day 160 now. I'm in a small apartment in a survivor settlement outside Chicago. The window is open. I can hear voices outside. The sound of people going about their day, trying to build new lives in a world that ended. I should be grateful. I'm alive when millions are dead. I have food, shelter, safety. I have a future, theoretically, but I can still smell it. The garbage, it's not really there. The doctors assure me it's an olfactory hallucination, my damaged brain creating phantom smells. But it's real to me. As real as anything. I keep a small bag of garbage in my closet. Fresh garbage that I replace every few days. Just enough to create a familiar smell when I need it. The therapists don't know about it. They'd say I'm not recovering, that I'm reinforcing the trauma, that I'm preventing healing. But they didn't live in that truck. They don't understand that the garbage isn't just a smell to me. It's safety. It's home. It's the thing that kept me alive when everything else wanted me dead. Sometimes, late at night, I go to the closet, open the bag, breathe in that familiar stench, and for just a moment, I'm back in the truck, protected, safe, alone but alive. Then I close the bag, return to my bed, try to sleep in a world that's too clean, too quiet, too wrong. This is survival. This is what winning looks like. This is the cost of staying alive, and I'll carry it for the rest of my life, however long that is. However many days I survive beyond these 160, I'll carry the smell, the memories, the knowledge of what I became. I'll carry the garbage truck with me, always. A prison I can never truly leave, even though I escaped it months ago. If you made it this far, if you listened to this whole story, thank you. You've witnessed something most people will never understand. You've seen what survival actually means when you strip away the heroic narrative and face the ugly truth. I survived, but I'm not sure I'm alive. Not in the way I was before. I exist. I function. I endure, and maybe that's enough. Maybe endurance is all we can hope for in a world that ended. Maybe the fact that I'm here, telling this story, breathing air and processing thoughts and existing as some damaged version of Derek Morrison, maybe that's victory. Or maybe it's just a different kind of defeat. A slower death. Survival without life. I don't have the answer. All I have is today. Day 160. And the smell of garbage that will never truly leave me. Stay alive. Stay safe. And remember, if you ever have to choose between death and degradation, know that degradation leaves scars that never heal. But scars mean you survived. And in the end, that might have to be enough. Thanks for listening to my story. Thanks for witnessing what I became. Thanks for understanding, if you can, why the smell of garbage will always mean safety to me, even as it reminds me of the person I used to be. I'm Derek Morrison. I'm a garbage truck survivor, and I'll never be clean again.